Brought to you by Penguin. The Ruin of All Witches by Malcolm Gaskill. Read by Kristin Atherton. Introduction. This is a true story about witchcraft in mid-17th century New England. At this time, none of its colonies, New Hampshire, Plymouth, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, sited along America's east coast, was over 30 years old. Each was still finding its way in a new world. Unlike the icy shores of Newfoundland and Maine, or the tropics of Virginia and the Caribbean, New England resembled the old, with hills and plains, forests and rivers. For much of the year the climate was mild, well suited to English bodies, colonists felt. Farmsteads produced cattle and corn. There were busy ports at Boston and Salem, and trade flourished. Yet life was fraught with peril. Settlers were far from home, assailed by sharp winters and sweltering summers, and hemmed in by wilderness. By day, a labourer could pretend he was still tending wheat in Kent, or herding sheep in Wiltshire, but the illusion was easily dispelled, especially after sunset. Old-world folk tales, where travellers were stalked by evil, became reality, trapping colonists in nightmares of echoing isolation and heart-thumping panic. In these moments, New England, for all its hopeful beginnings, meant only the skin prickle of being watched, the twisting grip of a curse, and the terrors of the dark. The setting for this story is a remote community in Massachusetts, 100 miles west of Boston, named Springfield. There, on the border between what they saw as civility and barbarism, Springfield's pioneers laboured to cultivate both land and a new way of living together, only too aware of how closely their fragile world was overseen by God and existed at his mercy. They contended with waves of epidemics, severe flooding, and constant tension with the Native Americans they called Indians, whose possessions they appropriated. They also clashed with Dutch traders into whose territory they strayed, and with English planters further down the Connecticut River Valley. Mostly, however, they clashed with their own neighbours, competing furiously for material advantage, farmland, livestock, wealth, and power. Whenever this fury subsided, consciences were apt to be pricked, guilt bubbling up in private thoughts, and in dreams, where colonists saw their own self-serving desires wrestling with those of their enemies. But still, they didn't yield, nor did they show remorse. Instead, conflicting emotions were battered away, projected onto a diabolic other, onto witches, and thus assuaged. Springfield's disquiet settled with lethal ferocity on a labouring couple, Hugh and Mary Parsons, whose ailing marriage epitomised deeper currents of animosity in the town. He was moody, taciturn, avaricious. She depressive and delusional, perhaps suffering from paranoid schizophrenia or postpartum psychosis. Years of quarrelling, gossiping, and bitten-back suspicions among neighbours, suspicions festering even between husband and wife, accumulated until a tipping point was reached in the winter of 1650–51. Springfield's community could no longer bear the presence of witches. For the Parsons family, the outcome was catastrophic. All but forgotten now, the troubled lives of Hugh and Mary, interlaced with that of Springfield's overlord, William Pynchon, were shaped by and reflect an age of upheaval and transformation.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?